He is being very mindful of that system that later on will become what Islam is today. So he is making choices. He's making very specific choices to make sure that you and I are not put in positions where Islam is difficult for us when it was never meant to be. Let me give you a more broad example the Quran gives us. The Quran, the biggest surah in the Quran is called Al-Baqarah. And it's named after this one story called Story of Al-Baqarah. And we read the story and people never... Here's why this story is so important. Banu Israel, to make this very simple for you, were told to slaughter a cow. This was إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تَذْبَحُوا بَقَرَةً. Indeed, Allah commands you to slaughter a cow. Now, you know the story. They start asking questions. Well, what type of cow? How big is the cow? How long is the cow? What color is the cow? How heavy is the cow? What does the cow eat? What does it do for a living? Well, where does it spend its holidays? What does it do for a hobby? They start asking all these questions about the cow. And every time they asked the question, Musa alayhi salam offered an answer. At the end, they ended up with a cow, لا فارض ولا بكر عوان صفراء فاقع لونها تسر الناظرين لا ذلول تثير الأرض ولا تسقي الحرث مسلمة لا شية فيها. They ended up with 10 specifications. It took them a year to find this cow. Now the point of this story is that had they slaughtered a cow that was the opposite of all these things, the opposite of every specification, right? Think of this 10 specifications of this cow that you find in the story. Imagine if they found a cow that was the opposite of that. It was farid, and it was not bikr, and it was not awan, and it was not yellow, and it was dalul, and لا تثير الأرض, and لا تسقي الحرث, and it's not مسلمة, and there's شية فيها. Would it have worked? And the answer is yes, and unequivocally. Of course it would have. Of course it would have. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not a cow that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prefers, but anything would have, any cow, as long as they did not slaughter a donkey or a horse, then they would have been, as long as it was a cow. This explains how our deen actually functions. I'm going to summarize this topic for you in 5 statements, because this is the best way I can do it, because I need you to understand this. This is the whole point that I ran this series to begin with. Statement number 1. Brothers and sisters, Islam is a river with 2 banks. It is not a tightrope. Tightropes are for circuses. Islam is a river with 2 banks. There is space within that river for people to be swimming in different lanes and still be inside the river. There are things that you will do that will remove you from the river and outside of the banks, for sure. For sure, there are choices that you can make that will remove you from this river and put you outside, for sure. If you decide that the Quran is not the word of God, or that there's something in the Quran that is missing, or that something needs to be added to the Quran, or there's something in the Quran that is not from the Quran, then you remove yourself from the river. If you decide Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam is not the final messenger, and that Jibreel keeps on coming with revelation, then you're no longer inside the river anymore. If you decide that Salah is not fard, or Hajj is not fard, or Siyam is not fard, then you're no longer in the river. If you decide that honesty and trustworthiness and istiqamah are not, and haqq and adl and justice are not ethics that are to live by and to die for, then you're outside the river. There are definitely fundamentals that will have you, this is not an ocean, it's a river, and there are banks. And there are things that you can do, and decisions you can make, and opinions that you can take that will remove you from that river, for sure. But it is a river. There is more room in there than maybe many of you and many of us were led to believe growing up. It's not a tightrope. It never was. That's the whole point of us learning these verses in the Quran. Or else there would be no point to it. Why would Allah tell the Sahaba not to ask the questions? Why would that be? Why would the Prophet ﷺ say, don't ask me more? Why would he say, well, I'm scared that it's going to become fard? Why would he say any of this stuff? Just come out, Ya Rasulullah, and say it's not, and then we're done. Right? All you have to do is walk out, say it's not a fard, and then pray. Right? That's what comes to mind. Like, he could have just done that. But he knows that that's not how the Islamic law is going to be built. He knows how this is going to work. That's the first statement. I'm going to translate each statement into Arabic just to make it easier for me in terms of translation. إخواني أخواتي هذه الخطبة هي الخطبة الأخيرة في السلسلة التي ابتدأتها منذ ربما 6 أو 7 أسابيع. الحديث عن التقدم نحو الفهم البسيط للإسلام، نحو الثوابت. نحن دين لا نحتاج أن نتقدم بأن نخترع جديدا أو نحدث ما لم يكن في ديننا أو نبتدع ما ليس جزءا من شريعتنا، وإنما تقدمنا كمسلمين هو أن نتقدم نحو سنة رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام، نعود إلى الأصول. تقدمنا نحو أصول هذا الدين، هكذا نتقدم كأمة. وهذا الفهم مهم، نحن نفتقر إليه اليوم كمسلمين يعني في مشارق الأرض وفي مغاربها، ومما يعني يفت في عضدنا كأمة هذه المفاهيم. وسألخص الفكرة اليوم يعني بخمس جمل بسيطة لعلها تنفع إن شاء الله تعالى. الجملة الأولى: إسلام يا أخواني، الإسلام نهر، الإسلام ليس خطا. الإسلام ليس خط وإنما هو نهر. نعم، لهذا النهر يعني جانبان، إذا اتخذت بعض القرارات أو فعلت بعض الأمور أو اعتقدت بعض الاعتقادات من الممكن أن تخرج من هذا النهر وأن تكون في خارجه، لكنه ليس خطا. والذي يرى الإسلام على أنه خط لا مجال فيه إلا لرأي واحد عند كل مسألة، فهذا لم يفهم الدين أساسا، ولم يفتهم لماذا أمر الله الصحابة ألا يكثروا من مساءلة رسول الله، لماذا النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام كان يقول لهم لا تسألوني إذا أنا ما أخبرتكم عن شيء، لماذا كان يخشى من تكرار العمل الاجتماعي، العمل الجماعي أمام الناس خشية أن تفرض عليهم، لأنه عليه الصلاة والسلام يعلم كيف سيقوم هذا الدين وكيف سيأخذ هذا الدين مكانه. الإسلام نهر، هناك سعة في هذا الدين، الله يسره على المسلمين، لكن نعم الإنسان إذا لم يؤمن بالقرآن كاملا على أنه كلام الله ووحيه يخرج من النهر. الإنسان إذا لم يؤمن بخاتمية رسالة محمد عليه الصلاة والسلام يخرج من النهر. الإنسان الذي ينكر الصلاة أو الصيام أو الحج أو الزكاة أو ينكر الأخلاق كالصدق والأمانة والحق والعدل والاستقامة يخرج من النهر. The second statement: this is by design. I call this the divine design. Islam is the way it is by design, not by mistake. You have difference of opinions on topics not because we failed to figure out what the right thing was. No, this is by design. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designed it to be from the beginning. Sometimes we don't understand. Oh, we're not sure what to do in salah with our hands. Here, a little bit up, a little bit down, a little bit here. Oh, we didn't figure it out. A mistake happened. No mistake. This is by design. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designed our deen to arrive at our doorsteps and our footsteps. It was designed to be like this. He told the Sahaba, don't ask questions. Well, why, Ya Rab? If we ask the question, he tells us what's right, and then we do it. No, that's not how Islam is designed to be. That's not how I want Islam to be. So don't ask him questions. And then he would tell us, don't ask me. If I let it go, then it's something that we let go. We're going to leave for scholars to take different aspects of Islamic law and look at evidence and interpret it depending on their time and their place and their context and come up with different opinions that will serve people's needs. This is the design of Islam. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it to be from the beginning. From the beginning. There are no mistakes. Nothing. The Ummah didn't fail to do anything. There's no failures because, oh, this hadith is not sahih, oh, we failed to figure. No, we didn't fail anything. This is how evidence is supposed to be looked at. From the beginning it was like this. The reason he didn't come out for Ramadan alayhi salatu because he knows how scholars are going to interpret evidence. See, if he came out every single night in Ramadan for 9 years that he lived and prayed Taraweeh, but there was one narration or two where he said it's sunnah, Islamic law would have made it obligatory. Because you're going to take what he did every night as much stronger evidence than something that one of the Sahaba narrated that he said. Understand? He knows that, alayhi salatu wasalam, so he stayed inside. He stayed inside because he wanted to make sure that Ramadan, that Taraweeh would be a sunnah for you. Just so that you can sleep at night if you're living in the northern hemisphere and Ramadan's in July. Or if you're someone who has call in the morning and you have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning so you can sleep, so you can pray Isha and sleep, and you're not at fault for doing that. Had he come out every single night, he would want it. He thinks he wanted to. And that is the optimal. And that's what we do. In every masjid all across the world, all 30 nights. There's not one night that the masjid is empty, right? Not one night in Ramadan is the masjid empty. But we are very fortunate that we received this revelation. We received the ruling here as something that's recommended, not obligatory. Because the Prophet ﷺ made sure he did. This is how Islam is suitable for all people. This is how Islam serves people from every background and every culture and every walk of life. This is how Islam is suitable for every time zone and time frame and historical period. It's through this divine design that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. What bothers me the most in my life is that Muslims don't understand that that's how it's designed. They don't understand their own law and how it's put together. And they're not interested in learning it. And that's a problem for me because this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala divinely designed this from the beginning. Or else you wouldn't have these commands in the Quran. Why would he tell people not to ask? There would be no reason for it. Why would the Prophet ﷺ not want to answer questions? He didn't answer, right? أَفِي كُلِّ عَامٍ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Do I do it every year? He didn't answer. If you read it, he diplomatically did not answer. He said, if I said yes, it would be wajib. Like, are you saying yes? Are you saying no? He didn't answer. He did not answer. Why? Because there's a reason for it. Don't ask these questions. The scholars will take all the evidence and interpret it, and that will be the part. That's why we have a river. That's why Islam is supposed to be that way. There's space in it for people. النقطة الثانية هذا التصميم الرباني للشريعة تصميم إلهي للدين صممه سبحانه وتعالى بأسلوب يخدم الناس في كل مكان وفي كل زمان وباختلاف أعراقهم وأجناسهم وخلفياتهم الثقافية والعرقية والدينية يعني والعمرية لماذا؟ لأن الله سبحانه صمم الإسلام هكذا. هذا ليس بالخطأ. إذا كان عندك رواية فيها ضعف ورواية فيها قوة ومسألة العلماء يختلفون فيها هذا ليس من تقصير المسلمين ولا هو خطأ اعترى الشريعة وإنما هذا من تصميم الله للدين. هو هكذا أراد سبحانه وتعالى. أراد أن يكون ثمة ثوابت لا يختلف عليها اثنان لا يختلف عليها عاقلان نتفق عليها جملة وتفصيلا وهناك مسائل هو تركها سبحانه وعفى عنها هكذا قال عفى عنها يتناقش فيها العلماء ويختارون فيها وتتبع فيها عالما تثق فيه بين الوجوب والحرمة والكراهة يا إخواني إذا لم يكن الأمر هكذا من أين أتينا بالوجوب وبالندب وبالإباحة وبالكراهة؟ لماذا؟ خلاص النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام يقول افعلوا كذا كلنا نفعل لا تفعل كذا ما أحد يفعل. أي من أين أتينا أن هذا مكروه وهذا حرام وهذا مندوب وهذا واجب؟ نعم هكذا الشريعة هكذا صممت. هذا مقصود من ربنا سبحانه وتعالى. فيؤلمني لما أرى إخواني وإخوتي المسلمين رجالا وإناثا صغارا وكبارا عربا وغير عرب لا يدركون هذه المسألة لا يعرفون أن هذه حقيقة الإسلام. The third point. So now that you know there's space, there's some space in Islam. How do you know what has space and what doesn't? Because that's the question that's going to come next. How do we know where space exists and where it doesn't? Well, that's where scholars come in. That's why we have scholars. When scholars point out that this is a space, this is an issue, this is a topic that has space in it. There's different opinions. Or when scholars of great knowledge and great intellect differ on a topic, you know that there's space in it. That's how we know. That's how we are Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. That's how we became what we are today. That's how our ummah exists today. Because we always understood things that way. All of our scholars agree on a number of things that define us as Muslims. It defines us, it defines our ethics, it defines our principles, it defines our basic rituals and basic habits and practices. And there's other stuff that the scholars differ upon. And they're scholars of great intellect and great ethics and great closeness and high-ranking closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they differ on topics. So you know, okay, because they're differing on it, then there must be space here. Or they will actually say it. May Allah forgive. May Allah forgive those who mislead Muslims to thinking that there's no space on topics where there is. That's all I can say. I was taught Islam by scholars who never once in their lives said one negative thing about another scholar that lived in their time or times before. We were instructed very clearly to never even imagine or think or dream of saying something that is disrespectful about another scholar, regardless of what they said or what they did, ever. And I will meet God with that. And I will come Yawm al-Qiyamah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with never saying a bad word about a scholar. If you listened to me for the last 10 years, I dare you to find a spot where I said one bad thing about one scholar or about their opinions. Never. We were taught, actually, by Shafi'i scholars to respect how the Hanafis pray and how the Malikis pray. I was taught by the Hanafi scholars to respect how the Hanbalis pray and how the Malikis give their futya. I was taught to respect that. To show respect and understand that these are people of great knowledge and they are talking about things that they are qualified to talk about. I will follow that which I was taught, and I will respect those who are following something they were taught that is a little bit different than mine, within the space, within the river, between the banks of what Islam is. May Allah forgive those who mislead our youth and mislead our Muslim people to think that that doesn't exist. Because this is a problem for us as Muslims. This is a real problem for us as Muslims today. And it has nothing to do with how Islam actually is put together. النقطة الثالثة أخواني وأخواتي، هذه المساحة التي أتحدث عنها والتي هي مجال الاختلاف بين العلماء والتي فيها سعة في الدين، كيف نعرفها؟ كيف ندرك أن هذه مسألة فيها سعة أو مسألة لا سعة فيها؟ وهذا هو مجال العلماء. لماذا عندنا علماء؟ دلوني على تخصص في الكون تدرسه من الكتاب وتتخرج وتعطى فيه شهادة. دلوني، أعطوني تخصصا واحدا تستطيع أن تدرسه من كتب لوحدك ثم تأخذ فيه شهادة وتصبح فيه ما في أحد. كل التخصصات يجب أن تذهب وتداوم ويكون ثمة من يعلمك ومن يرشدك ومن يدلك. لماذا الإسلام والله مستعد تفتح كتاب تقرأه وتجي تجادل فيه الشيخ أو تجادل فيه فلان أو تتحارب فيه مع فلان أو تسمع لك مقطع من يوتيوب؟ تتخيل والله أروح الطب أنا اسمع، اجلس في البيت اسمع الطبيب في بلد ثاني واجي الصبح اتقاتل مع الطبيب الذي اعمل معه، والله الطبيب الثاني قال كده. هذا مرفوض في كل مجالات العلم الا في الاسلام. الا في الاسلام نحن مضطر اتحمل هذه الترهات وهذه التفاهات، مضطرين نتحملها. مضطر اجلس ويجيني طفل عمره 12 سنه يسالني اذا كانت عقيدتي سليمه ولا لا، يسألوني إذا كان هذا الرأي من أين أتيت بهذا الرأي، الشيخ الفلاني قال كذا. أنا مضطر أجلس أسمع هذه التفاهات. لماذا؟ لأنه واحد عنده يوتيوب فشغل، والله يا حبيبي اتفرج على كرة القدم أحسن لي، لا تتفرج على الشيخ، اسمع كرة القدم، تعال أنا أعلمك الأمور. أريح ما يغسل عقلك واحد ثاني ثم تأتي إلي وقد غسل دماغك ولم تعد تستطيع أن تفهم الدين كما أراد الله له أن يفهم. ومع ذلك والله لن أنال بفمي ولا بلساني عالما واحدا حتى ألقى الله، اتفقت معهم أو اختلفت معهم وكلهم على رأسي، والذي يزورني أجعله أضعه على هذا المنبر وأجلس تحته عند رجليه. هكذا علمنا الدين. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه يغفر لكم يا فوز المستغفرين. استغفروا الله. الحمد لله وحده وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اتبع نهجه ووفى عهده. And there's nothing personal about this. This has been happening, what I'm talking about today has been happening for as long as I can remember, for as long as I've been doing this. I have there's no specific incident that actually triggered these khutbahs at all, not at all. I just say, may Allah forgive those who misteach our youth, that's all. Because it's making it more difficult for us to take this ummah and stand on our feet and move forward and stay united. It makes it very difficult when they're being misled by others. It's very difficult. The fourth point, there are certain mental disorders and personality traits that don't allow people to understand Islam this way. And I am willing to bet my life on this. I swear by it, that those who don't accept what I'm saying today, most of the time, it has nothing to do with Islam. It has a lot to do with whatever psychological attributes they have in their character. Some people need things to be either white or black. They can't understand that there's a spectrum. They don't understand, they don't like it. So to say that it's a river is actually anti-climatic for them. And it goes against everything that they are built to understand. So it's a personality trait. It has nothing to do with Islam itself. And every time I run into someone who is that close-minded, who will not listen, who will not open their mind, I find it has nothing to do with Islam. It has everything to do with their personal struggles. With their mental, psychological build-up, let's put it, psychological structure, however you want to put it. And this is where we struggle. This is our real problem in Islam today. Where we have people with these struggles taking on the role of talking to people about what Islam is supposed to be and what Islam is. And it's not. And that's just not something that we can afford, really. If you are of the nature where everything has to have a clear answer, then I have to help you calm down. No. There are many things in Islam that will never have a clear answer. Because scholars have been differing upon it for 1,000 years. And they have good arguments for both. And if you're like, well, why is that? That can't be. No. It can be because that's how it was designed to be. It's okay. That's how Islam is built. It's a beautiful law. It's a law that will continue to evolve until Yawm al-Qiyamah. The law, not the fundamentals, not the ethics, not the principles, but the law. The law will continue to evolve and it will grow as the needs of the human race grow with it. And that's why we have scholars. That's why they study يعني Arabic language and usul al-fiqh and tafsir and fiqh and hadith and seerah, so that they can come to the point where they're capable of giving valid opinions that make sense to people. A lot of what I see has nothing to do, a lot of the struggles that I see has nothing to do with their understanding of Islam or how they were taught Islam, but rather by specific personality traits that they can't get rid of. And it has to, some people just enjoy being outliers. There are some people who enjoy being outliers. If you say that all the shuyukh are doing well, and everyone is coming together, and the community is working, they don't like that. They want, there needs to be a big enemy, and they have to be amongst a minority. They can't function if they're not a minority. So if they're not a minority, they're going to make up a minority. They're going to go and find little differences that they don't like and say, okay, this guy is dal, munharif, this person has no idea what they're doing, this person is lost, I can't go pray with that person anymore, I have to have my own, and go do their own thing. Some people need to be a minority. They need to have an enemy. They need to, why? Why do you need that? You don't need that. We never needed that. This goes against everything that is sacred to us as Muslims. The most sacred thing we have. What is the most sacred thing we have? It's our unity. It's our unity. It's my willingness to actually overlook all of your flaws and for you to overlook mine, so that we can continue to work together in the same space and grow together. Not the opposite. But these personality traits don't know how to do it. And I've seen too many of them. النقطة الرابعة أخواني، هناك أمراض نفسية وعقلية وسلوكيات تمنع الإنسان عن فهم الإسلام بهذا الشكل. وأنا أرى أن كثيرا من المتعصبين ومن المتزمتين ومن الذين لا يستطيعون أن يعملوا مع الآخرين لا علاقة لهذا الأمر باستقامتهم وانحراف غيرهم، لا علاقة لهذا، يعني لا علاقة يعني بأن الشيخ الفلاني لا يأخذ برأي الصحيح أو أنه هو يعني لا، إنما الأمر متعلق بشخصيته. هو في شخصيته لا يستطيع أن يعمل مع الآخرين، لا يحب أن يكون الكل يدا واحدة، يحب أن يكون من ضمن الأقلية. هذا يسمونه يعني مرض الغرباء، لازم أكون غريب. النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام نعم قال، لكن فهم حديثه له سياق، هذا النص له سياق مهم يجب أن يفهم فيه، لكن لازم أكون ضمن أقلية، لازم يكون الكل غلط وأنا على الصح، هذا ما ينفع. يجب أن يكون لكل مسألة جواب واحد واضح محدد. لا يا أخواني، الإسلام لم يصمم هكذا. في كثير من المسائل الفرعية لم يصمم هكذا، وفي المسائل الأصولية نعم ليس إلا جواب واحد. الذي يشرك يخرج من الدين. إذا جعلت مع الله ندا، إذا أحببت أحدا مع الله أو كما تحب الله، أو أطعت أحدا كما تطيع الله، هذا يخرجك من النهر كله. نعم هناك أجوبة في منتهى الوضوح، هناك أمور أخرى تصميما هي ليست واضحة. My final point I may share with you, and this really just comes from the fact that we need to understand that when we're not willing to comprehend our deen the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it forward, then it's almost as if we're objecting to him. It's almost like we're objecting, we don't like that he made it that way. It's almost like saying, why did you say ثلاثة قروء in the Quran? Why did you say طهور or حيضات? So the Imam Abu Hanifa and Shafi'i could not have two opinions. Why did you say قروء? Why did you say a word that could be understood in different ways? Why? As if you don't like it. As if you're objecting to God. And that's really what's happening on the inside. It's like you don't like that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Islam this way. This is how he made it. Whether you agree with it or whether you don't agree with it doesn't really make a difference. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put our deen, and this is how he made sure we have it. And it's designed that way so that it will serve the best interest of our unity. It'll bring us together. The most valuable thing that we have. Holding on to our unity. Being able to stay as one ummah. I am committed to making sure that we produce from this masjid and within those who I teach, people who are unprejudiced, who are not closed-minded, who understand Islam appropriately, and who commit themselves to Islam properly, and they have zuhud and they have wara', and they're not. What I'm telling you today is not an invitation to do whatever you want. Here, Islam is no. I'm telling you, it's a river with two very clear banks. This is not an invitation to follow whoever you want. No, but this is a demand that you must have respect for your fellow scholars. You must have respect to the scholars of this ummah who are alive today and who died. You must understand that there's sometimes different ways to understand one thing. And then if you understand it in one way, that doesn't mean that the person who understood it in the other way is wrong. And if you're going to see it that way, then you are adding to the problem. As a nation, we can't afford more of this ongoing disunity and division that we already are suffering with. And to suffer with division over topics that are by design supposed to be different. By design, they're supposed to be things that people differ upon, is very, very upsetting, honestly. And I think it's time for us to get rid of it. I remember there's a sheikh, one of the older scholars in Syria. I'll end with this, inshallah. Sheikh Hassan Habannak al-Maydani, rahmatullah alayhi. Someone I did not meet, but I wish I did. And he, at one point, spoke to one of the scholars. It wasn't really a scholar, but he was someone who was a younger, enthusiastic Muslim. Let's put it that way. Who was pointing fingers at a lot of others. And he told him, this is what he said in Arabic, قال لا نعترض على رأيكم وإنما نعترض على أسلوب عرضكم لرأيكم. We don't have a problem with your opinion. Your opinion is respected. Our problem is with the way that you are conveying your opinion. You're conveying your opinion in a way that is eluding others to believe that there is no other way to understand this. That every other way to understand this one topic is wrong. That is what we're objecting to, not to your opinion. Your opinion is respected. Of course, you have an argument, we respect your opinion, but the way that you're conveying it, the way that you're explaining your opinion, that's what we're not okay with. And this is how Islam in Sham has always been taught. And this is what I believe I can't see it any other way. If you read the Quran and you look at the Prophet ﷺ, you will find this to be a very simple and clear fact of Islam. This is a 3-hour lecture that I usually do over 3 days. I will be teaching it probably towards the end of the summer and the fall. And we'll put it out once we do. And if you're interested in this topic, you're welcome to come and listen into details where I'll argue the basic pieces of evidence and allow you to maybe understand a little bit more of what we're talking about. I hope that was a benefit to you. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ أَمَرَنَا بِأَمْرٍ عَظِيمٍ فَقَالَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَتَهُ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا صَلُّوا عَلَيْهِ وَسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد وارض اللهم عن الأربعة الخلفاء السادة الحنفاء أبي بكر وعمر وعثمان وعلي وارض اللهم عن أزواجه أمهات المؤمنين وعن آله الطيبين الطاهرين وعن صحابته الغر الميامين وعن التابعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعنا معهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات اللهم فرج هموم المهمومين ونفس كروب المكروبين وارفع الغم عن المغمومين وارفع الظلم عن المظلومين واحقن دماءنا ودماء المسلمين اللهم احقن دماء إخواننا المستضعفين في كل مكان احقن دماءهم في غزة فلسطين وفي لبنان والسودان وفي كشمير وأفغانستان وفي اليمن وفي الشام وفي غيرها من بلاد الأرض ما علمنا منها وما لم نعلم يا رب العالمين اللهم رد المسجد الأقصى إلى رحاب المسلمين أخرج الصهاينة منه أذلة صاغرين ردنا أجمعين إليك شبابا وشيبا إلى دينك ردا جميلا وتب علينا اللهم من جميع ذنوبنا توبة نصوحا طهرنا بها قلبا وجسدا وروحا وما ذلك عليك اللهم بعزيز ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن